Fentanyl crisis, drug abuse crisis, drug addiction, killing hundreds of thousands of people every single year. Just like what are your thoughts on this? Let's we can't solve it, but at least to kind of just give some church's perspective on this.
It's been something we've been fighting since I was a kid, since the '80s when they came up with the whole the whole slogan, "Just Say No." Nancy Reagan came up with that. That's long ago it was.
Did that work for you from Nancy Reagan?
I don't know if it was from Nancy Reagan that worked for me. I think my dad and his belt was what worked for me.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle had some interesting thoughts on that.
He did.
It's true. Yeah.
Going saying that kind of the white community deserves it. I don't know if he'd say deserves it, but we didn't care as much when it was a crisis in the black communities, when drugs was a crisis.
Crack was the problem that was tearing apart communities.
But now since this is more of a white problem. It's not a what was it? It's not a crisis, or it is a crisis. It's not a anyway, whatever it was.
It used to be a crime spree. Now it's a crisis.
Now it's just a crisis.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Who it is, but just the. It almost sounds trite to say that, of course drugs isn't good for you. And of course you shouldn't be doing drugs. And so, you might say, well, why are you guys even talking about this? But one of the reasons why we're talking about it is because people are doing this.
Well, I think it's 70. I think the number I looked at was 70,000 Americans died last year from fentanyl overdose, which the fentanyl, for those who might not be aware, is where you're having alternative drugs which are being laced with fentanyl, and therefore people are thinking that they're taking cocaine or crack or heroin, and it has fentanyl in it, and then they're dying of drug overdose. I went to the hospital last year and dealt exactly with that with a young person who had died of a fentanyl overdose. I've known a couple of different people. So it is, something which is happening actively right now. It's not just like a few, it's a large number of people.
Right, and that's the reason why, saying that, it's trite, or, it's overplayed, and we've heard, don't do drugs and all that kind of stuff so many times.
Which I think we all agree with.
We do, but and obviously that hasn't helped or hasn't worked. Maybe for somebody it has, but it hadn't. But that almost allows someone to say, well, see, it's not really all that serious, when in fact it's very serious.
Yeah, and I think it's a crisis too, and kind of obviously I don't think any people are advocating like, no, we need to have more fentanyl, because obviously it's sweeping across our borders. It's coming in. People talk about the China connection and to South America or Mexico, and getting into the United States and killing tens of thousands of people. Now probably hundreds of thousands of people have died from this. But then the realization too, obviously there's innocence always caught in the crosshairs of that, but that the pull towards drug use and this thought that like, okay, if we just legalize all drugs, if we just kind of like, there's something within that I think that fundamental escape or trying to numb the pain or trying to escape reality. I think that's one of the things that as Catholics, as Christians, as human beings, to say like, how can we face this in a better way? Because obviously people are going to this, they're looking for something. They're looking for whether it's some sort of escape or some sort of high or some sort of just numbing the pain, all these sorts of things, the variations of those things are just a way to have fun. That there's something within that of like our humanity. There's a goodness that is not being experienced by people, and I think so often people are that they're not connected to community in any sort of meaningful way, or family life, or other things too. And that's to me is the place to say, like, wherever you're struggling with that, wherever any of us are, we need to be a lot more intentional about reaching out to other people, about having people in our lives that are going to help us to be better, having people that are going to challenge us to be the best version of ourselves, to use that kind of, maybe sort of trite phrase, but to be the saints we're called to be, to use a more religious phrase there. Because if not, the attraction for drug use is really strong. And obviously there can be devastating consequences for that. We don't want that for anybody. We want anyone who's in the grips of addiction or in drug use to be able to get free from that with help, because all of us need help. But man, they're made for so much more, and God's got a plan for their lives. And I think that's maybe the hope that we can speak into that too.
Yeah, I think that one of the difficulties, obviously, though, with the whole situation in general is the question of how do we address the problem? Like, in what boundaries or what laws, name for boundaries, what laws do we put in place, and what boundaries so that we can curb this But then the question becomes like identifying the source of like where is this problem coming from and why is this becoming a problem? Because I think that everyone's kind of focusing on the fentanyl and trying to stop the fentanyl use. But then the question becomes, are we enabling this by having loose boundaries and by having loose restrictions on drugs? And now we're even having more loose restrictions on drugs. And so like when you loosen the restrictions on drugs socially by social acceptance, which has been for a while, and now we're slowly, progressively, you're releasing and loosening the legal restrictions on drug use. And now, like, I mean, how many people do we know that smoke marijuana legally? And now it's just like, oh, every state in the United States, like, and so like the question is as we're loosening these social boundaries, and now we're loosening the legal boundaries, but I think that there's also the question where there's a legitimate question of, is this now the consequence of when you have loose boundaries, bad things come in? I'm not saying that people deserve that, but there's a certain point where this is the consequence of loosening certain boundaries. So then the question becomes, should we strengthen those boundaries back up? Should we go back and try to create laws as well as taboos in society? Because I mean, at this point, when you have few social taboos, I mean, the only social taboo it seems like I see a lot now is that if you're intolerant, the only type of social taboo we have now is against if you don't tolerate everything. But then the question becomes like, what do we do as a society to protect our persons? And a lot of the people who are obviously dying are a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s.
And a lot of the people that are producing materials that are advocating for other types of recreational, not legalized, but recreational drugs, psychedelics and other things too. In a sense, there's almost kind of like a wink and a nudge towards this, that that this is going on, this is happening, this is a great thing, or at least a thing that's it's okay if you do it. If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. But I think there's something within that too, that this lie that we're all just total islands, we're all individuals, and what I do doesn't affect you, and it's like it does. And just looking at the fentanyl crisis as obviously that's true, because what individuals are doing affects society as a whole, and individual decisions are impacting other people's lives, sometimes with devastating and horrifying consequences. So to take seriously the fact that we're part of a community, that that we belong to each other, and that I'm called to build other people up by my actions and my decisions. And that's one of the things I think that this sort of liberalizing or libertarian sort of view of drug use, it doesn't take into account the fact that my actions affect you and your actions affect me. So
you
that's
think of that question, or the comment, and my brother's keeper. That's kind of where you start getting into that, and where does that boundary cross over into my brother's keeper, into being, I think one thing that you say to a friend who's trying to tell you not to do something is, you say, well, are you my dad, or you're my mom, or whatever. And I think that's just trying to get someone to back off. But there, like you're saying, there is, to a certain extent, that, to a great extent, actually, that we are our brother's keeper. And that part of that means protecting each other and encouraging each other not to go down the road of destruction, something that could hurt not just us, but other people around us. I mean, we talk about peer pressure all the time, and I kind of know who you are by who you hang out with. This is the kind of pressure that comes with that pressure comes and influences people to start into a habit like this that either they've never had or maybe they have now, and it becomes a destructive mess in our society, because we have people who die, like you were saying about this young lady you were talking about, that this could have been prevented in a lot of ways. But there's, to a certain extent, we can't prevent everything. I get that. I get making a law and a rule doesn't prevent everything. But to do nothing seems to me to be the problem, and we're being told that let's don't do anything about this, or let people have freedoms and reap what they sow from it.
Yeah. So I guess, all that to say, I'm against fentanyl. And praying for those in the throes of it and affected by it, impacted, and pray for those who work in helping people get free of it as well, because I think that's really important work and that they need our support.
Yeah.